Let me tell you something that I still can't fully wrap my head around, even now, even after everything that's happened. There are moments in life that split your story into two parts, before and after. And for me, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon in October, standing in a bank I hadn't visited in years, holding a piece of paper with my name on it, realizing that my grandmother had been protecting me from across time. Protecting me from something I didn't even know I needed protection from. Protecting me from my own mother. And my mother, she had already taken everything. Or at least, she thought she had. I want you to sit with me for a little while today, because this story is long, it's painful, and parts of it are going to make you angry on my behalf. But it ends in a way that I think you need to hear. So please stay with me. My grandmother, I called her Nana, was the kind of woman who made every room warmer just by walking into it. She was small, maybe 5'2", with soft white hair she always kept pinned up, and these reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain around her neck. She smelled like lavender and coffee, and she always had a tin of butter cookies in her kitchen cabinet that she pretended was just for guests, but really was just for me. She was my person. From the time I was a little girl, she was the one constant thing in a life that often felt like it had very few constants. My mother, on the other hand, was complicated. I say that carefully, not to be cruel, but because it's true, and it's fair. She wasn't always a bad person. I want to be honest about that. But she was deeply, profoundly selfish in ways that shaped my entire childhood. She and my father divorced when I was 4, and she raised me on her own, which I know was hard. But there was always this undercurrent in our relationship, this unspoken message that everything she did for me was a sacrifice she was keeping track of. Like love was a ledger she was maintaining, and someday the bill would come due. Growing up, I spent as much time at Nana's house as I possibly could. Weekends, summers, school breaks. Nana never made me feel like a burden. She never made me feel like my presence was costing her something. She just loved me, purely, simply, completely. She taught me to bake bread. She read to me until I was old enough to read to her. She told me stories about her own life, her own mother, the way things used to be. She was my whole heart. Now Nana was not a wealthy woman. She lived in a modest house in a small town. She drove an old car. She shopped sales and clipped coupons and never talked about money in the way people who have a lot of it tend to. But she was careful. She was quiet about things. And she had a mind that worked in ways that I wouldn't fully understand until much, much later. When I was about 8 years old, I remember Nana taking me with her to run errands one afternoon. We went to the grocery store, the pharmacy, and then she made one more stop, the bank. I remember sitting on one of those little chairs in the lobby, swinging my legs, eating a lollipop they gave me at the teller window, while Nana spoke quietly with someone at a desk. It didn't mean anything to me at the time. It was just Nana doing grown-up things. But I would think about that afternoon years later, and I would understand exactly what she was doing. She was opening a safe deposit box in my name. I didn't know that then. I wouldn't know it for almost 3 decades. I was 8 years old, and I was eating a grape lollipop, and I had absolutely no idea that my grandmother was, in that quiet, unassuming way of hers, building me a lifeboat. Fast forward to my late 30s. I'm living across the country from where I grew up. I have a job I love, an apartment I'm proud of, a small circle of friends who feel like family. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and I build it myself, mostly. My relationship with my mother had always been strained, but we'd settled into a kind of polite distance. Holiday calls, occasional visits, nothing too deep. She had remarried twice. She had her life. I had mine. We coexisted, and then Nana got sick. It started with what seemed like normal aging things, fatigue, some confusion, trouble with her balance. But over the course of about a year and a half, it became clear that it was more than that. She was diagnosed with a progressive neurological condition, and the decline was hard to watch. I flew back as often as I could. I called every single day. I sat on the phone with her even when she couldn't remember what she'd just said, even when she got confused about what year it was, even when she called me by my mother's name. I didn't care. I just wanted her to hear a voice she knew. My mother, to her credit, was physically present during this time. She lived closer, so she took on a lot of the practical caregiving, and I was grateful for that genuinely. But there was something happening beneath the surface that I didn't fully recognize until after Nana passed. My mother was positioning herself. She was going through Nana's house, going through her papers, asking questions about accounts and property and insurance. At the time, I told myself she was just being organized, just being practical. I didn't want to think badly of her during an already painful time. Nana passed away on a morning in early spring. I got the call from my mother, and I was on a plane within hours. By the time I arrived, my mother had already called a lawyer. The weeks that followed were among the worst of my life. Nana had a will, and it divided things between my mother and me fairly. Some sentimental items specifically for me, some financial assets split, the house to be sold, and proceeds shared. It was clear. It was legal. It should have been simple. It was not simple. My mother contested things that were not hers to contest. She claimed certain items were gifts she'd given Nana over the years. She removed things from the house before the estate inventory was complete. Jewelry that Nana had specifically mentioned to me, a piece of furniture I had been told would be mine, boxes of photographs that were irreplaceable, gone. When I asked her about them, she either denied knowing what I was talking about or said she was keeping them for safekeeping. When I pushed, she cried. When I pushed harder, she got angry and said I was being ungrateful and that she had done everything while I lived far away and barely helped. That wasn't true. But grief makes everything muddy, and I was so exhausted, so heartbroken, so desperate not to turn my grandmother's death into a war that I backed down more than I should have. The estate took about 6 months to settle. By the end of it, I had received some of what I was supposed to receive, but far less than Nana had intended. My mother had maneuvered and pressured and manipulated until the path of least resistance was just to let her have what she wanted. I felt hollowed out. I felt like I'd failed Nana. And more than anything, I felt like I'd lost 2 people. My grandmother, and whatever version of my mother I'd still been hoping, somewhere deep down, might show up for me. I went back home across the country. I tried to move forward. I cried in my car more times than I can count. I put Nana's remaining things in a box in my closet because I couldn't look at them yet. I tried to grieve and heal and remind myself that things are just things, and the real Nana, the lavender and coffee and butter cookies version, lived in me forever and couldn't be taken. And then, about 8 months after she passed, I got a letter. It came in a plain white envelope from the bank in my grandmother's town. I almost didn't open it, honestly. I thought it was going to be some kind of account closure notice or administrative thing that had been overlooked during the estate process. I opened it while standing at my kitchen counter, half distracted, and I read it twice before it actually landed. It was a notice informing me that I was listed as the primary account holder on a safe deposit box at their branch, and that as the box had not been accessed in some time, they were reaching out to confirm I wished to maintain the account. It said the account had been opened in 1998. I was 8 years old in 1998. I stood in my kitchen and I read that letter 4 more times. My hands were shaking a little, but I didn't fully understand why yet. I just knew that something had shifted. Something that had been hidden was trying to come into the light. I called the bank the next morning. I explained who I was, that I had recently lost my grandmother, that I had received this letter. The woman I spoke with was kind and professional and confirmed that, yes, there was a safe deposit box in my name. My name, not my grandmother's, not my mother's. And that as the named account holder, I was entitled to access it at any time. She told me I would need to come in person with my ID. I booked a flight that same afternoon. I didn't tell my mother. I want to be very clear about that. Something in me, instinct, maybe, or Nana whispering to me from wherever she was, told me to keep this quiet, to go alone, to not say a word until I knew what I was dealing with. I flew back to my grandmother's town on a Thursday. I stayed at a small hotel near the town center. I barely slept. I lay in the dark and thought about Nana taking me on errands when I was 8. I thought about the bank lobby, the lollipop, the way she spoke quietly with someone at a desk while I swung my legs and didn't pay attention. I thought about how she had always been so careful, so quiet, so intentional. I walked into that bank on Friday morning at 9 o'clock. I had my ID, my birth certificate, the letter, and a feeling in my chest that I can only describe as standing at the edge of something enormous. The bank manager was a calm, professional woman who walked me through the process with patience. She confirmed my identity, verified the records, and then she led me back into the vault area where the safe deposit boxes were kept. She used a bank key along with the key on file. Because Nana had left a key in her own records, it turned out, specifically labeled for this, and she opened the box and left me alone with it. The box was not huge. It was a standard-sized safe deposit box, maybe the size of a shoebox. And I sat down in that little private room, and I opened it, and I started to cry before I even fully understood what I was looking at. On top was a letter, handwritten. In Nana's handwriting, which I would recognize anywhere, that slightly slanted, careful cursive she'd had her whole life. The letter was addressed to me. I'm not going to read you every word of it, because some of it is too private, too deeply mine to share with the world. But I will tell you what she said in essence. She said she had opened this box for me when I was 8 years old because she had seen, even then, things about my mother that worried her. She said she loved her daughter, my mother, but that she knew her. She said she had watched my mother her whole life choose herself first, and she was afraid that when the time came, my mother would find ways to take what wasn't hers. She said she hoped she was wrong. She said she hoped she would be able to talk to me about this herself, in person, before it ever became necessary. But she said that if I was reading this letter, then she was gone. And she wanted me to know that she had thought of me, that she had planned for me, that she had loved me so specifically and so deliberately that she had spent decades making sure I would be okay. She had put things in that box starting in 1998. Over the years, she had added to it. She couldn't deposit money directly since it was a box, not an account, but she had put in bonds. Old savings bonds, bought steadily over the years, made out to me. She had put in a small collection of jewelry, not flashy, but real. Pieces that had been in our family for generations that she had specifically not listed in her will because she was afraid my mother would find a way to claim them. She had put in documents, records of a small account she'd set up separately that she had also transferred to my name years before she passed, which meant it had never been part of the estate at all. And she had put in photographs, dozens of them. Photos of her and me over the years, photos from my childhood, photos I had never seen that she had clearly curated and saved, specifically because she knew they were irreplaceable, and she wanted me to have them no matter what. She had also put in a letter from my mother, sealed, with my mother's name on it, and she had written a note to me saying that I could choose whether to give it to her or not, that the choice was entirely mine. I sat in that little room for almost 2 hours. The bank manager knocked gently at some point to check on me, and I told her I needed a few more minutes, and she said, "Take all the time you need." I think she could tell what was happening. I think she had probably seen things like this before. When I finally walked out of that bank, I had a bag with me, and I had the letter to my mother in my hand, and I had this feeling, I don't know how to describe it exactly. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was something older and quieter than happiness. It was the feeling of being held by someone who was no longer there to hold you, of realizing that love, real love, doesn't end. It plans ahead. It leaves things behind. It says, "I knew you might need this someday, so I made sure it would be here." Now, I want to tell you what I did next, because I thought about it very carefully. I called a lawyer first. I wanted to make sure I understood exactly where I stood legally with everything in that box. Because the bonds, the account, the jewelry, all of it had been set up in my name before Nana died. None of it had ever been part of the estate. My mother had never had any legal claim to any of it. The lawyer I spoke with was very clear. What Nana had done was entirely legal, entirely deliberate, and entirely airtight. She had spent years doing this quietly and correctly, and there was nothing to contest, nothing to challenge, nothing to undo. Then I called my mother. I kept it simple. I told her I had been back in town to handle something related to Nana, and that I had discovered a safe deposit box that Nana had set up in my name decades ago. I told her that the contents were mine and had always been mine. I kept my voice calm. I kept it factual. I gave her no details she didn't need. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then she said, "What was in it?" And I said, "Things Nana wanted me to have." Another pause, and then she said something I wasn't fully prepared for. She said, "She always loved you more than she loved me, you know." And I thought about that. I thought about it for a long time afterward, because I don't think it was true in the way she meant it. I don't think Nana loved me more than she loved my mother. I think she knew her daughter deeply and loved her anyway, with clear eyes, and I think she knew me deeply too, and worried about me in a different way. And I think the box wasn't about love being more or less. It was about Nana seeing clearly and acting on what she saw. It was about a woman who had spent her whole life being quiet and careful and intentional, pouring all of that into one final act of protection for the grandchild she adored. I gave my mother the sealed letter. I mailed it to her without a return address. I don't know what was in it. I never will. But I know Nana wrote it, and I know that whatever she said, she meant it with the same love and the same clear eyes that she brought to everything. My mother and I don't really speak now. That's not entirely because of this. There was already so much damage, so much history. But this was the moment that made me stop pretending the damage wasn't there. That made me stop walking on eggshells and start standing on solid ground. And the solid ground, it turns out, was built by a 5'2" woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain who took me to the bank when I was 8 years old and never said a word about it. Here's what I want you to take from this, if you're still with me. Sometimes the people who love us most are the quietest about it. They don't announce it. They don't ask for credit. They don't keep a ledger. They just love you. Carefully, patiently, and over time. And sometimes that love shows up years later in a way you never expected. In a place you didn't know to look. In a letter you didn't know existed. In a box that has had your name on it since before you were old enough to understand what it meant to be protected. Nana saw everything. She knew. She planned. She showed up for me in the only way she could once she was gone, which was by making sure that what was mine would still be mine, no matter what. I think about her every single day. I wear one of the pieces of jewelry from the box, a small gold ring that had belonged to her mother, my great-grandmother. It fits perfectly, like it was always meant for my hand, and sometimes when I look at it, I feel her so close, and I think, she knew. She always knew. If you have a Nana like mine, please call her. Please sit with her. Please let her tell you the stories even if you've heard them before. Because someday, those stories are all you'll have left, and they will be worth more than anything in any box. And if you've been through something like what I went through, if someone you trusted took from you, if grief became a battle you didn't ask for, I want you to know it's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to stand up. It's okay to let yourself be held by the love that was left for you, even when the person who left it is gone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sitting with me through this whole story. If this touched you in any way, please leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe if you're new here. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and the people who love you quietly. They're worth everything.